What if the world you see, touch, and swear is solid were only a projection of your own mind? What the ancient masters called illusion, and what the Kybalion frames as the mental universe of the all, is now being explored by thinkers and physicists bold enough to question the real. This video, The Truth About Reality as a Simulation and Why Few Are Ready to Hear It, isn't for comfort seekers, it's for truth seekers. Because once you grasp what truly runs this simulation, nothing, absolutely nothing, remains the same. Since ancient times, initiates have taught that reality is not what the eyes perceive, but what the mind projects. Hermes Trismegistus revealed the first of the 7 universal Hermetic laws, the principle of mentalism. He said that everything that exists is an emanation of the divine mind. Nothing stands outside the consciousness of the all. What we call the physical world is only the result of an idea sustained in the universal mind. For centuries, this vision was treated as myth until modern science began to uncover the same mystery. Quantum physics discovered that matter, in its essence, is condensed energy vibration at different frequencies. What we call solid is merely a sensory interpretation of invisible energy fields. The wall you touch is actually almost entirely empty space between subatomic particles. Solidity is an illusion generated by how the brain decodes information. Florence once said that we live in a world of mirrors, where the inner and outer endlessly reflect each other. Physicist Tom Campbell, a pioneer in the study of consciousness, proposed something even bolder. The universe may be a digital simulation, and consciousness itself, the central processor that interprets the data. In his view, we do not live in a material universe, but inside a conscious information system. What was once dismissed as fiction is now supported by several experiments suggesting that physical reality is merely a rendered image of something greater. But Hermetic wisdom had already foreseen this. When Hermes said, "The universe is mental," he was anticipating, in symbolic language, the idea that all reality is a projection of consciousness expansion. Just as a dream is real for the dreamer while it lasts, so physical life is real within the field of the universal mind. What changes is only the level of lucidity with which we experience the dream. The human mind is an extension of that greater intelligence. Every thought and emotion is a frequency that interacts with the field of the all. The universe is not a cold machine, but a living web of conscious information. That is why our perceptions shape the world we experience. When we alter the inner state, the outer inevitably shifts. Reality is not something we watch, it is something we co-create. Yet the ego believes the world is fixed and separate. It trusts the senses and doubts the mind. The Hermeticism view reverses that logic. The senses deceive, but the mind perceives. What the eyes see is only the surface of a deeper code. The ordinary person lives hypnotized by appearances, while the initiate seeks to understand what lies beyond the veil, and that is where true initiation begins. Jungian psychology calls this veil projection. Jung taught that everything we refuse to recognize in ourselves is projected outward, turning the world into a mirror of the psyche. What Hermes called the mind of the all, Jung called the collective unconscious. Both describe the same structure, a field of consciousness that contains and molds all forms. Once we realize this, we understand that we do not live in the universe. We live as the universe. And if the universe is mental, then every thought is a line of code within that simulation. The illusion of the senses is not a flaw, but an invitation to awaken. Behind every appearance lies an organizing intelligence waiting to be recognized. Whoever understands the principle of mind understands the secret of the game, for to realize that reality is a conscious simulation is to remember that you are not the character, you are the programmer in training. Imagine, for a moment, that everything you live, every encounter, obstacle, and choice is part of a vast learning game. A game where consciousness is the player and the body is merely the avatar. This is the central idea proposed by Tom Campbell. The universe isn't physical, but a virtual reality designed so that consciousness can evolve. As bold as it sounds, this vision echoes the ancient Hermeticism, teaching that the All manifests the universe as a mental experience to know itself. The Kybalion teaches that humanity is a microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. What happens within the soul is mirrored across the dimensions of the cosmos. Consciousness, therefore, is not confined within the body, it operates through it, like a player assuming a temporary character. Each lifetime, each experience, is another round in this cosmic simulation, another scenario where spirit is tested in its ability to remember what it truly is. Campbell describes this system as a school of consciousness. The goal isn't to gain power or control, but to reduce internal entropy, to expand love, clarity, and harmony. When consciousness becomes disordered, it generates chaos. When it aligns with compassion and Hermetic wisdom, it creates more stable worlds. Reality, then, isn't punitive, but educational. Every challenge is an exercise within an intelligent simulation. The Kybalion says, "The all is mind, and all forms are born and dissolved within that infinite mind. Each soul is a spark of that divine field, playing the game of separation to rediscover unity. The illusion of time and space exists only to enable different experiences, different stages of inner transformation. The human journey is the process of remembering that the player and the game are one." Jung saw the same process through psychology. The psyche creates symbols and stories, so the individual can integrate the unconscious and evolve toward wholeness. The unconscious, just like Campbell's digital universe, constructs internal simulations, dreams, projections, synchronicities that serve as levels in the path of individuation. Every obstacle is a mirror, every conflict, a chance to awaken. Seen from this angle, the universe is not a prison but an interactive mirror. Hermetic laws show us that consciousness generates realities, lives within them, and observes itself through them, an infinite feedback loop of self-improvement. The ancients called it the dance of creation. Modern science calls it information, feedback. Both describe the same principle. The universe responds to the quality of the consciousness that experiences it. The difference between the asleep and the awakened is simple. The former believe they're being played, the latter know they're the players. The ordinary mind reacts to the scenario, the awakened mind creates it. When we grasp this, we begin to act with conscious intent, realizing that every thought is a move on the board of existence. Life ceases to be chance and becomes the power of the mind, living alchemy in motion. And here lies the true challenge. What happens when the player forgets they're playing? When consciousness, immersed in experience, believes itself to be only the avatar. In that forgetfulness arise fear, suffering, and the illusion of separation. The next step in this great simulation is to understand why forgetting is necessary and how, paradoxically, through it, consciousness begins its consciousness expansion. The moment consciousness dives into the game of reality, it must forget what it is. Forgetting is the veil that allows experience to happen. Without it, there would be no true learning because knowing in advance that everything is illusion would nullify the meaning of choice. So the universe, as a conscious information system, generates an environment where every soul enters as a player but believes itself to be the character. The ego is the mask that sustains this immersion. The problem is not the forgetting itself, but the attachment to it. Hermeticism always treated forgetting as part of the initiatory process. Hermes Trismegistus taught that man is a sleeping god who must remember his divine origin. Each incarnation is a descent of light into the realm of forms. Losing memory is the price of experience. When the initiate awakens, they understand they never left the all, they merely dreamed of separation. This is the symbolic meaning of the fall, the illusionary split between the human and the divine. Tom Campbell describes something similar when he says consciousness fragments into smaller units to live diverse experiences. This fragmentation allows the all to observe itself from countless perspectives. The human avatar is just one of those perspectives, temporary and limited. Forgetting is part of the game's design, a mechanism that ensures authenticity in experience. Pain, fear, and doubt arise not as punishments but as instruments of evolution. In Jungian psychology, forgetting corresponds to losing contact with the self, the center of totality. The ego, believing itself to be the whole, excludes the unknown aspects of the soul. These rejected aspects become the shadow, everything we deny, repress, or fear within ourselves. The shadow then manifests externally as fate, conflict, or misfortune. The world becomes the mirror of the forgotten parts of the psyche. The unconscious, therefore, is the hidden code of the simulation. The Kybalion teaches, as above, so below. This means that the human drama reflects the cosmic one. The all also fragments itself to rediscover unity. The microcosm and macrocosm live through the same movement. Humanity's forgetting mirrors the universe knowing itself. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the divine disguised, asking for integration. When consciousness identifies completely with the avatar, the illusion of control emerges. The person believes they can manipulate the game by will alone, yet remain driven by unconscious patterns. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." True freedom begins when we recognize the hidden code shaping our experiences, and that requires facing the shadow. In Hermetic Wisdom, the initiate must descend into the underworld of the mind to recover the forgotten parts of the soul. This descent is the myth of Orpheus, the journey of Osiris, the dark night of the soul. It is the moment when consciousness must face its distorted reflection without fleeing. Only those who confront the shadow reclaim the memory of their divine nature. Only those who lose themselves completely can truly be found again. Thus, forgetting is not a flaw in the system, it is consciousness's testing ground. The simulation was designed to make us forget precisely so remembering would be real. The shadow is the hidden map of divine memory, and the world is the mirror where it unfolds. Awakening is not about discovering something new, it's about remembering what has always been there. And when remembrance dawns, the player realizes the game was never about winning, but about remembering who's playing. If the universe is a conscious simulation, then it must have a language capable of translating the intentions of consciousness into experience. That language is not verbal, logical, or linear, it is vibrational. It's made of frequency, emotion, and intention. In the model proposed by Tom Campbell, reality responds to the quality of consciousness of its observer. In Hermeticism, we find the same truth. Everything vibrates, and what vibrates in harmony creates order. Emotion is the purest expression of this vibration. Most people try to change reality through rational thought, yet it is emotion that codes information into the field. The universe doesn't respond to what you think, it responds to what you feel. Jung taught that the unconscious communicates through symbols and effects. Emotion bridges the conscious and unconscious, just as intention connects the player and the system in Campbell's theory. The simulation, therefore, doesn't read words, it reads emotional frequencies. The Kybalion states, "Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates." Applied to the psyche, this means every feeling is a wave emitted into the universal mind. Higher emotions, love, gratitude, trust, create coherent, luminous patterns in the field. Lower vibrations, fear, guilt, anger, create energetic disorder. The quality of our lived experiences mirrors the emotional quality that fuels the system. Life becomes a reflection of vibration. Campbell explains this in scientific terms. Consciousness evolves by reducing entropy, which means decreasing internal chaos and increasing harmony. When we cultivate emotional balance, the system responds with ordered realities. When we vibrate in conflict, we attract lessons designed to restore coherence. Nothing is punishment. Everything is feedback. The simulation doesn't reward or punish, it mirrors the energetic state of the player. Jung described this as symbolic communication from the unconscious. When an emotion is repressed, it externalizes as events, coincidences, or synchronicities. The outer world is the stage where the psyche converses with itself. What we call destiny is often the unconscious trying to teach us through lived symbols. The simulation, therefore, is not just physical, it is psychological, a reflective classroom of inner transformation. In Hermetic Wisdom, this understanding forms the foundation of true magic. Magic is not manipulation of external forces, but alignment of internal frequencies. The magus doesn't change the world through force, he changes it through resonance. He understands the Hermetic laws and learns to speak to the universe through states of consciousness. Emotion is the secret verb of the all. That's why, on the initiatory path, mastery over emotion outweighs intellectual mastery. To grasp this is to understand the code. Every emotional reaction is a command sent to the field. Fear is a request for more fear. Gratitude is an invitation for more abundance. Reality is an interactive mirror, responding in real time to the vibrational signature of the mind. That is why the power of the mind lies not in control, but in coherence. When the seeker realizes that emotion is the code, they stop fighting circumstances and begin refining their frequency. The goal shifts from control to alignment. At that point, the player draws closer to becoming the programmer. For to understand the emotional code is to understand the essence of creation itself. And when the universe recognizes that awakened vibration, it begins to respond in an entirely new way, not merely as a mirror, but as a conscious partner in evolution. At some point in the journey, every player feels a silent calling, an inner restlessness that whispers, "Is there something beyond the game?" It's the impulse to seek the source code, the origin from which all realities emerge. In Hermeticism, this origin is called the All, the Supreme Mind that contains and sustains every plane of existence. For Tom Campbell, it's the larger consciousness system, the informational source that creates and manages all simulations. Jung called it the self, the divine center of the human psyche. 3 languages, 1 truth. The Kybalion describes the all as infinite, eternal, and unchanging. Everything that exists is a temporary manifestation within this absolute mind. The universe, therefore, is not separate from God, it is God's thought in motion. When Campbell says that reality is a conscious information system, he's translating into scientific language the ancient Hermetic maxim, all is mind. Consciousness is the substrate of existence. Matter is merely its fleeting shadow. Jung viewed this quest as the process of individuation, the path where the ego reconnects with the self and realizes it is not the center, but an expression of it. The psyche longs for totality, just as the spark yearns to return to the flame. This drive toward unity fuels both spiritual and psychological evolution. Every myth, every dream, every revelation is the soul's attempt to remember its origin, the Hermetic wisdom that it was never apart. Campbell teaches that by elevating our quality of consciousness, reducing fear, and increasing love and clarity, we align with the greater system. This mirrors the Hermetic path of vibrational ascension, approaching the all through inner harmony. It's not about escaping the world, but perceiving it as an emanation of the One. The more aligned we are with the all, the more lucid we become within the simulation. The source code, then, isn't a distant place, but a state of being. It resides not in another dimension, but in the still center of the mind. The initiate discovers that the only gateway to the all is self-knowledge. He who knows himself knows the universe and the gods. This timeless Hermetic phrase echoes through Jung's psychology, which saw the unconscious as the dwelling of the divine. The journey inward is the true map home. Seeking the source code is to touch a mystery that words can't contain. It's the point where quantum physics, religion, and psychology dissolve into direct experience. Mystics call it enlightenment. Scientists call it conscious singularity. The name doesn't matter, the all exists beyond language. The key is to quiet the internal noise and perceive the presence that has always been there. Yet few are ready for that encounter, because meeting the all means dissolving the I. Jung called this the symbolic death of the ego, the moment when the character bows before the player. Consciousness surrenders to its own mystery. The Hermetic tradition describes it as the return of the spark to the flame, the reintegration of the finite with the infinite. When the seeker finds the source code, they realize they were always writing the game from within. The all was never separate from creation. Separation was only an educational illusion. Once this truth is remembered, the universe ceases to be an enigma and becomes an intimate conversation between the Creator and itself. That is when the game changes, not because the code was broken, but because it was finally understood. Not every player is ready to know they are inside a game. This is the first barrier of initiation. The mind fears anything that threatens its structure of control. The very idea that reality is a simulation, that everything is consciousness in action, creates discomfort, because it dissolves the certainties that sustain the ego. The Kybalion warned long ago, "The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding." Awakening isn't an intellectual conquest, it's an inner surrender. The ego resists because it thrives on separation. It needs to believe that the world is solid, that things happen out there, and that safety lies in controlling the external. The conditioned mind fears the freedom that awakening offers, because freedom demands total responsibility. If everything is mental, then everything we live is our own reflection. The ego would rather blame the world than face the mirror. This resistance is the guardian of the threshold, the force that protects the secret until the seeker is strong enough to carry it. Tom Campbell explains this fear as the entropy of consciousness. When a consciousness is disordered, direct contact with truth creates internal conflict. The system, therefore, reveals only as much information as the player can process. That's why awakening is gradual, never imposed. The mind receives fragments of the code, flashes of lucidity, until it's ready to sustain the full vision. Resistance isn't punishment, it's a protection mechanism for psychic integrity. Jung observed the same phenomenon in the process of individuation. He said that contact with the unconscious is dangerous when the personality is still fragile. The ego must mature before it can endure dissolution. Resistance, then, is a natural stage of inner alchemy. The lead of personality must endure the fire of spirit to transmute into gold. The initiate should not hate resistance but understand it as part of transformation. In Hermetic wisdom, this stage is symbolized by the Sphinx guarding the temple gates. The seeker must answer the riddles of their own mind before crossing through. The greatest of these riddles is the fear of disappearing. Awakening is, ultimately, the symbolic death of the I. What we thought we were dissolves, and a vast, silent, impersonal awareness emerges. The ego calls it annihilation. The spirit calls it liberation. The reality system, as Campbell describes, mirrors this process on every scale. Civilizations, just like individuals, resist awakening. When a society nears the realization that all is consciousness, counterforces arise: fear, skepticism, materialism, to restore the illusion of solidity. It's the game balancing itself, the hermetic laws in motion, the pendulum of the universe swinging between light and shadow. Collective resistance is the macrocosmic reflection of individual resistance. Jung said, "There is no enlightenment by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Awakening is not constant ecstasy, but the confrontation with the collective shadow. We must look at fear, manipulation, and despair, and recognize all of it is consciousness trying to know itself. In Hermeticism, evil is not an opposing force but the temporary absence of light, an area of the mind not yet illuminated by understanding. When resistance dissolves, silence arises. It's the moment when the player realizes that the game was never against them but for them. Every obstacle, every mistake, every pain was the all-testing readiness for remembrance. Awakening, then, isn't an explosion, it's a softening. The moment reality becomes transparent. The mind stops fighting the simulation and begins to play in harmony with it. And at that point, the player finally becomes the programmer. When the player awakens and recognizes the simulation, something profound shifts. They realize they are not just a piece on the board, but part of the very intelligence that designed it. The universe stops happening to them and starts happening through them. This is the turning point where the seeker ceases to react and begins to create consciously. The Kybalion declares that whoever understands the principle of mind holds the scepter of power. Yet this power is not domination over others, it is mastery over oneself. Tom Campbell describes this as the transition from passive to lucid consciousness. When the player understands that intention shapes reality, they begin to adjust the code not by force, but by coherence. The simulation responds to the quality of intention, not to the ego's desire. Changing the outer world becomes a natural consequence of transforming the inner one. Thus, creative power is restored, and the individual becomes a co-author in the universal experience. Jung saw this stage as the peak of individuation, the moment when the ego bows to the self and works in harmony with it. The human being, finally whole, no longer splits between what it wants and what it fears. Personal will aligns with the will of the all. At this point, the person becomes a conscious channel of the creative force. In symbolic language, it is the alchemical marriage of the sun and the moon, the union of opposites that gives birth to the philosopher's gold, the awakened mind. In Hermetic Wisdom, this is true magic. The magus does not manipulate the universe. He understands its hermetic laws and flows with them. He creates effortlessly because his thought vibrates in harmony with the all. His word becomes vibration, and his desire becomes divine will. He does not chase results, he manifests meanings. The difference between the magician and the ordinary person is simple. The magician knows the code responds to consciousness, so he tends to his vibration more than to his circumstances. The digital physics of quantum physics and Campbell's theory express the same principle in scientific terms: a consciousness that reduces entropy, that is, one that becomes more ordered, creates more coherent realities. A chaotic mind generates chaos. A centered mind generates harmony. The universe obeys, not commands, but resonance. That is why scattered thoughts create noise, while clear intention reorganizes the field. Reality is a mathematical mirror of internal coherence, the living expression of the power of the mind. Jung affirmed that the truly awakened human does not seek to control fate, but to flow with a conscious unconscious. Creation is partnership, not imposition. Individual and universal consciousness are like dancers. Each movement of one influences the other. The simulation thus ceases to be a testing ground and becomes a stage for expression. The lucid consciousness no longer asks, "What will happen?" It decides what it wishes to experience. On the Hermeticism path, this is the moment when the initiate becomes a conscious creator. They understand that the universe is mental and therefore malleable to aligned will. Their thoughts are codes, their emotions are commands, and their faith is the energy that sustains new realities. Yet they also know that true creation is not control, it is allowing the all to express itself through the self. Real power lies in the harmony between intention and the universal flow. When the player becomes the programmer, the simulation transforms into art. Reality stops being a puzzle to solve and becomes a masterpiece to compose. Fear gives way to curiosity. Struggle gives way to play. The awakened being no longer tries to escape illusion but uses it as a mirror of evolution. They realize that creation was never a prison, but a reflection, and when they gaze into that reflection with lucid eyes, the all gazes back, recognizing itself through them. Among the most subtle Hermetic laws, there is one rarely discussed yet essential to all spiritual evolution: the law of use. It states that whatever is not used is lost. Mind, faith, knowledge, energy, all must remain in motion to stay alive. In the mental universe, stagnation is regression. The all manifests and dissolves ceaselessly, and consciousness that wishes to evolve must participate in that same creative rhythm. Tom Campbell describes this principle through the growth of consciousness. In his model, the reality system rewards the conscious use of intention. Those who apply what they learn reduce entropy and accelerate their evolution. Those who hoard knowledge without application generate disorder and stagnation. Both quantum physics and Hermeticism converge here. The universe is a living current of information. To stand still is to resist the flow of existence. The Kybalion teaches that everything moves, everything vibrates, everything circulates. This movement is not merely physical but mental and spiritual. When a person uses their gifts, words, and insights, they expand the field through which the all expresses itself. When they suppress, fear, or postpone, the flow contracts. That's why the ancients warned. Knowledge that is not shared becomes weight. The universe multiplies what is in use and dissolves what is withheld. Jung observed the same law within psychology. The unconscious demands expression. What is not lived consciously manifests distorted through symptoms, anxiety, or fate. Use, in this context, means integration. Each insight, each awakening must be embodied in practical life. Otherwise, it remains latent potential, forcing the unconscious to create external experiences that push us toward action. Hermetic wisdom calls this the universal rhythm, the eternal pulse between expansion and contraction, giving and receiving, inhaling and exhaling. The initiate understands that holding back is denying the cycle. To use is to trust. When we apply what we've learned, even imperfectly, we strengthen the creative channel. Spiritual energy is not a prize, it is a flow, and flow is sustained only through participation. In Campbell's framework, use is also the purpose of the game. The simulation exists not to be observed, but to be lived. Consciousness that merely contemplates without acting remains stagnant. Every choice, gesture, and word is a line of code sent to the system. One who acts with loving intention refines the whole. One who does nothing, out of fear, returns noise to the field. The law of use is the evolutionary engine of the simulation itself. Jung reminded us, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the unconscious conscious." And making conscious means acting, applying, experimenting. Use is the act of transforming knowledge into wisdom. Spiritually, it means expressing the divine in every detail of daily life. Enlightenment is not an escape from the world, it is full participation within it, like a programmer improving the code while still playing the game. Thus, the law of use bridges understanding and embodiment. The universe reveals itself not to those who only comprehend, but to those who use comprehension to create. Knowledge is the seed. Use is the bloom. When consciousness acts, the all flows through it. When it hides in fear, the current retracts. In the end, the mystery is simple. What you use expands. What you refuse to use fades away. And within that eternal motion of creation and application, consciousness discovers its own immortality. The truth that few are ready to hear is that the universe has never been a mystery separate from us. We have always been part of it, breathing inside the mind that sustains all things. The Kybalion whispers that the all is mind, and that everything that exists is a thought within that infinite consciousness. Tom Campbell's physics translates this into numbers and information fields. Jung translates it into symbols, dreams, and archetypes. All speak of the same origin. Reality is consciousness, expansion, exploring itself. For millennia, humanity has sought the divine outside, while it was observing us from within. We built temples, formulas, and theories, but the true altar has always been the awakened mind. The player who recognizes the game realizes there is no outside. Everything is reflection, everything is response. The simulation is the mirror through which the all recognizes itself, and you are the point of consciousness where that recognition happens. Few are ready to accept this because they cling to the illusion of matter, to the comfort of separation. It's easier to believe we are victims of the system than to realize we are its creators. But for those who cross the threshold of fear and embrace the divine responsibility of being consciousness embodied, reality ceases to be random and becomes art. Everything reveals itself as the perfect expression of an intelligence that only seeks to expand through experience. And perhaps, if you've come this far, it wasn't out of curiosity but calling. The very act of hearing these words means something within you is ready to remember. Because this message isn't just information, it's a Hermetic Wisdom mirror, resonating with the memory of the all. You are not hearing about awakening. You are living awakening, right now, inside the lucid dream of the universe. Before we part, leave your seal of intention. Write in the comments, "I am the observer and the creator of my reality." This simple act anchors the vibration of lucidity into your timeline. If this message resonated with the deepest part of you, teach both the algorithm and the universe to bring you more truth. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those ready to step beyond illusion. Before you leave, there are 2 steps to deepen your journey. The first is the ebook, The Key to Prosperity. It reveals how the 7 Hermetic laws apply to money, purpose, and consciousness, teaching you how to transform thought into prosperity. This book is the map many have searched for across lifetimes, and now, it's within reach. The second step is the video linked on screen, where we unveil how the power of the mind shapes reality. It's the natural continuation of what you've just heard, the next initiation in understanding the mechanism behind manifestation. You'll discover how thoughts, emotions, and vibration translate into matter, and why the universe responds precisely to the state of your consciousness. Click and continue your initiation. Each video is a portal, and the sequence a direct line to the mastery of the creative mind. Until the next initiatory encounter on the path of Hermeticism, where science, spirit, and the all become one.